Hey everyone, and welcome to Old Testament Survey 1, and for some of you, welcome to Eternity Bible College. In this first video for your Old Testament Survey course, we're going to go through just very quickly an overview of the Old Testament. Now, I don't know what your background is, I don't know how long you've been reading the Bible, and I also don't know if you've even read the Old Testament in full. So as we're going through this short video, if we get to books of the Old Testament and you find yourself realizing, man, I've never even seen this part of the Bible, that's totally okay. That's why you're taking this class. So let's dive in. We're going to go through the entire Old Testament, and our Old Testament in our Bibles is usually broken into some sections. Now, the first section is actually called the Torah, or sometimes you may have heard it called the Pentateuch. This section consists of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Torah is a Hebrew word that means teaching, instruction, or law. Now, you may have also heard these books referred to as the Pentateuch. Pentateuch is a Greek word that means 5 scrolls. So from Genesis to Deuteronomy, we've got 5 books. Sometimes this section is called the 5 scrolls or the Pentateuch. For this course, just know that most of the time I'm going to refer to it as the Torah. Now, the next big section in the Old Testament we call the historical books. Here we've got Joshua and Judges, Ruth, the Samuel books, the Kings books, the Chronicle books, and Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther. Now, these books in our tradition are referred to as historical books because they are in some way recounting the events of the Jewish people. Some of the books are going to trace the people as a whole, like Joshua and Judges, Samuel, Kings, Chronicles. It's going to trace the whole nation. But some of the books are really going to zoom in on individuals within the nation of Israel, like Ruth and Esther and even Ezra and Nehemiah to a sense. Now, the next big section, the one that you're probably pretty familiar with, are the prophetic books. And here we've got the guys like Jeremiah, Isaiah, and Ezekiel, and then all those smaller ones that you probably haven't read, like Obadiah and Nahum and Amos and all of those. Now, for many folks, when we talk about the prophetic books, we're referring to books that were authored by prophets. So, for example, Jeremiah is a prophetic book because he was a prophet and he authored the book. So even though we've got books like 1st and 2nd Kings that have prophets a part of the story, we're not calling those prophetic books, not because there's no prophecy in them, but because they weren't authored by a prophet. Now, honestly, don't worry too much about those books because we're going to get to them in Old Testament Survey 2, which isn't this class right here. Now, for the next section, the next big section, it's called the wisdom books. And here we've got Job, Proverbs, Psalms, Ecclesiastes, Song of Songs. And again, you don't have to worry too much about these because we're not going to get to them until Old Testament Survey 2. Now, there's one last section that I want to talk about, and it's called the Deuterocanonical books, or sometimes you've heard of it as the Apocrypha. Now, in our tradition, we don't see these books as authoritative or as inspired in the same way that the other books of the Old Testament and New Testament are, but we do think that they're very helpful for understanding culture and the progression of the history of Israel and kind of the ideas and themes that were happening between the Old Testament and the New Testament. Like I said, we're not really going to be studying these in this class or in Old Testament Survey 2, but if you ever get the opportunity to take a New Testament backgrounds class, you'll get to dive into those books. So there you have it. Those are the books of the Old Testament. And even if that was new for you, hopefully it was pretty straightforward, because in the next video, we're going to make things a little bit more complicated as we compare and contrast the organization of our Old Testament compared to the Jewish scriptures.